My name is Evert Poor. I'm Saulteaux Métis. Saulteaux is Plains Ojibwe of the Anishinaabe people. I actually hold status as Treaty 4. Though I was not raised traditionally, I basically have connections to the community and continue to learn. I introduced myself as Saulteaux Métis because I have a really strong Métis background on both sides of my family that go back to the Red River. But because of basically our government structure, I have to choose to be either Métis or First Nations. My mother felt it was very important that we actually choose status. So I hold status as Treaty 4 for that reason. Basically, because really felt that it was important that we recognize our indigeneity, and she recognized that because she said she paid a lot for that relative to racism, discrimination, residential schools, all other things that she experienced as a visibly Indigenous person. That's who I am relative to my people. I am the multicultural and Indigenous program manager for Fort Edmonton Park. That's what I do. In the park, I support all the Indigenous staff we have in the park. I'm also responsible for the narrative across the park relative to developing out the Indigenous and the multicultural narrative. Because from our perspective, it is our stories. They need to be told by our people. It is our experience because it's really right in the name, Indigenous people's experience. Historically, things have been put in a different perspective relative to the colonial perspective. And that's not always the full truth and authentic story. So by having Indigenous people share their stories, they're basically, it's much more of a truthful and honest representation of who we are. And I guess the importance of it, when you ask the importance, it dispels a lot of myths and misconceptions about who we are. As I talk about this space, basically, a lot of people do not understand that we've always been here. We've been in this space since the world began, and people need to understand that we lived upon this land for thousands of years very successfully. So by telling those stories and telling our stories, we basically are able to convey that to people that don't understand that history of our culture, our existence upon this land, and our connection to the land. That's why I think it's really important that we basically have that voice. Well, it really tells it from our perspective relative to pre-contact. There's a sort of a demonstration of our success and connection to the land through the rest of this space. And people don't see that. They have a very skewed perception of who Indigenous people are, sort of that Western mythology and such. But this really shows the existence of the people on the land, how we lived, and basically all the things that were surrounding that sort of lifestyle relative to plants, animals, that connection to the land. Even within here, we've gone to the extent that we try to be very authentic in our messaging and such. When you look at the artifacts within here, they were produced by the community and they were done as authentically as possible. So when people come through, they'll often talk about history, they'll ask about artifacts, and I can say to them, well, this teepee that you're looking at, it was produced traditionally, and if you were to come here 150 years ago, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, this is what you would have seen. This is the product of our work. This is the tools and things that we use successfully upon this land. So that's why it's important that basically we have that opportunity to show how we lived before contact. I think there's a strong connection. I mean, technology is a part of our lifestyle. And I think we've effectively used it in here to tell story. And that's really a lot of the value in this space. And that's a lot about who we are as a people. We're storytellers. And this space, with the use of technology, can do that and convey it in a way I think that is applicable and also, I think, relatable to a lot of the people that come through here. The trees behind me, they talk. They'll tell stories in language. A lot of the other technology relative to displays and such will demonstrate sort of history through time. You'll see the bison running across the prairies and things like that, across the floor. And that basically is a use of technology to bring those stories to life in a very, very effective way. It's very unique because you would think that telling an ancient history and telling stories from the past, technology would not have a part of that. But I think it is a very, very effective way of doing that. It's capturing the essence and the stories so that those stories can be passed on. And from a perspective of the Indigenous community, that's how we educated, and that's how we shared our knowledge through stories. So the use of technology basically helps us to convey those messages and those stories. I think the effective way it does is in the sense that it really shows the ethnography of the Métis, who they are, where they came from, their existence, and who they are as a people. But it also links relative to the fact that, as I indicated, I'm Métis. And how am I Métis? It's because my mother has been here since the world began, relative to her mother's mother, breaking their water upon this land, and so on and so on. So we've always been here. That's the Indigenous connection to it. So when you look at the Métis, a lot of times when you look at those cabins and go into those cabins, they're about the connection. They're about family and who we're connected to and who we're related to. Kinship, Wakotawin, we're all related. And basically within this space, it tells that story and it draws those connections so that we are in kinship in this space. And I think it effectively does that. It basically tells the Métis story, but it also has a really strong connection to the Indigenous story and where we came from. So I think that's why we've sort of done that, is effectively does not cause or show that divide. A lot of times there's separations in who we are relative to the sort of presentation of our history and culture. We don't do that in here. It's all integrated, it's all connected. And I think that's important. I think this is one of the most important elements of this space, is that we basically tell story from time immemorial to right to today, what's happening within the community. And we offer that opportunity for people to come through, hear our stories in language, see our language. But what that does is basically, for the non-Indigenous community, is showcase that culture and that history. For the community, basically it connects them. And I think there's a very important element that we do in here. We tell the modern stories. When you go into the meeting place at the very end, it's an experience of what's happening today. It talks about murdered and missing women. It talks about residential schools. It talks about other things that are beyond that. We're not just our trauma. When you go in there, you'll see representation of the successes that we have in the community. You'll see the faces of doctors, lawyers, writers, movie stars, very, very successful people in our community. So it begins to convey that message in today's terms, is we're not our trauma, we're not our stereotypes. We are successful people. We have a tremendously rich culture that we wish to share with people, across the world and within this community that we often don't recognize as a rich history of Indigenous people. We have, as you say, a sort of a stereotype or a history that people were this way. Well, this facility begins to change that paradigm. We hope that when people get to know us as a people, they begin to see us in a different way. They begin to see that history, that value, and that culture that we bring to this community today that we live. From our perspective of the community, it basically, I hope it instills pride in the people that come through here that are of Indigenous ancestry. And it begins to showcase that there's value in connecting to your culture, because if you know who you are and where you come from, that builds resiliency, that builds pride. And that is important that we actually have that as a people in our community, that we are very proud of what we have as a history. And we get to showcase that in this space right up to today. We have a market at the end of this facility that is Indigenous, totally. Every one of those 170 artists in there are of Indigenous ancestry. Everything that they produce that in that environment basically goes back into the community relative to the benefit of it. So we basically are, from time immemorial, right to what's happening today on the ground. I think it's sort of what I alluded to previously, that we are a rich people. We have a rich culture. We have a lot to share historically and today within the communities. A lot of our teachings and things, when you go through this piece and you hear the elders talk, there's profound meaning in that. And I think people, the non-Indigenous population can learn from that. Relative to the facts of things that are relevant today and happening today, connections to the land, connections to the environment. Those are important things for all people to understand. When I speak often, I'll talk about treaty and those connections and what that is. As Indigenous people, we've been on this land since the world began, and we did not understand the land as a commodity. Non-Indigenous people saw it as a commodity. So when Europeans arrived, we said, sure, we'll share this land with you, but we'll make a covenant with you. And we feel the land's important. It's been a gift from the Creator that we are here to care for our children, and their children's children. We'll share this land with you as long as you respect us as a people and respect the land. And how we'll do that is we'll make a covenant. As long as the sun shines, the grass grows, and the water flows, we'll basically share this land. But you must respect the land in that context. Because if any one of those things stopped or ceased to exist, we all cease to exist as a people. That is really an environmental message. And that's really, I hope to get people begin to understand those messages when they go through this space, and when they leave that back door, they begin to see us in a different way. And they begin to see us, as a successful, resilient population that's been on this land forever. And we've stewarded this land and we've cared for this land. And you get to benefit from that, basically stewarding and caring of the land. So I think that's hopefully some of the messages they get. There's a lot of messages in here, but that's kind of the overarching one. I want them to see us in a different way.